I'd like to add my good morning and welcome to those you've already seen up here. My name's Dave. I'm one of the pastors, one of the ministers here at Gold Hill at this church. And it is great to see so many of you here this morning. Whether you are here every week, and I see your face most weeks, or whether this is your first time visiting this church or any church, welcome. Really good to have you with us. Whether this is sort of fairly normal and you're used to this kind of place, or whether for you this all feels a bit weird and wonderful and strange, and why are people singing and what's going on. However you are this morning, great to have you with us. And my job this morning is to try and explain a little bit about what's going on and try and explain a little bit about what this whole faith thing is about. So I want to do that using some words from the Bible. If you don't have a Bible with you, it's all right. Most people don't bring a Bible with them to church. There's some people around with some Bibles. If you want to follow along, you can. If you just want to listen along, that's fine as well. But if you want one, if you wave your hand around, then a Bible will wing its way towards you. So I remember when I was 5, going back a while now. When I was 5, I was at school, and I went to school in Luton because that's where I lived. And I remember there was a thing that we had. Each of the classes in the school, at the end of the week, would award to one person in the school, one person in the class, what was known as the Triers Band. And the band was a sash. It was a red, black, and white sash. Those were the colours of the school. And it was the Triers Band for someone who tried really hard. And every class gave one out to someone in the class. And then in the assembly at the end of the week, all of the triers from the school would be brought up to the front and congratulated and clapped, and sort of there was a thing of honour because you tried very hard. It was lovely, beautiful thing. A lot of schools do something very similar. But you know, one of the things it taught me from a very early age, and it's something that has kind of been compounded again and again and again in life, is this. You do something so that you get a reward. So I tried hard. Was I really trying hard because trying hard was important? Or did I really want to be the person who everyone saw had tried really hard and got a reward and got a clap and got praise from people? Then I remember when I was 7, my family moved. I'm going to quick up through my life quickly, don't worry. When I was 7, we moved from Luton to Reading. And I remember we would go around and we would look at houses, and we were looking at the houses, and my parents tried to involve my brother and I in that and sort of say, what do you think about somewhere like this? Would this be nice? And I remember saying one time in the car as we were travelling somewhere that there was a house that was quite nice, but my parents weren't that keen on it. And I said, why? What's wrong with this house? And they said, well, it's in the wrong catchment area. I was 7. And I said, what's one of them? What's a catchment area? And they said, well, it decides which school you're going to go to. And I said, okay, fine. And they said, and we want to make sure you get to go to a good school, so we want to live in the right area. And I thought, great. What I was learning, deep down somewhere, was that if I wanted to progress in life, if I wanted to do well, I needed to go to the right school, so I had to live in the right kind of area. Then I went through school, and then I got to year 6, and then it was, which school am I going to go to next? And in this area, there's the 11 plus system, and everyone takes that test and stuff. That where I grew up in Reading, there wasn't that. But there was a grammar school which you could take the test for if you wanted, and you could see if you got in, and so I did. And I did go to that school. But there was a lot of, in year 6, there was, well, are you going to take a bit more tutoring to get into it? Because really, if you go to that school, then your life is made. If you put the effort in now, then you'll get rewarded with that. And then it'll open up doors for the future. And then, of course, exams come along and grades come along. And all the way, we're taught, work hard so that you'll be rewarded with something, because then life will be good. And then, of course, it gets to, what are you going to do after school? Are you going to get a job? And if so, you need to make sure you got the grades so you can get the good job, and you need to have a good extracurricular activities. Or are you going to go to university? I thought I was going to go to university, and I did. So I needed a good UCAS statement, and I needed all of the points, and I needed all of these things. So I would do these things so that it would look good for me, so that people would think highly of me, so that I could do this thing. And it was this, you do something to get a reward. And then, of course, it doesn't finish when you leave education, because then you have to get a job. And to get a job, you think, well, I need to get the absolute best I can do, so I need to work hard for my degree so that I get a good degree, so that employers will look at me. And, you know, whether what I was learning was actually useful or not was beside the point. I needed to look impressive. I needed to look good. As it happens, I was studying theology at uni, and the jury's out with this church whether that was useful for me or not, but I'll leave that for you. And so then you need to get the best job so you can get the best salary. And why do you need the best salary? So that you can get onto the ladder. So you can get onto the property ladder. We even call it a ladder. It's about climbing. It's about getting better. It's about working harder so that you get this reward, so that you can live in the nice house, so that you can get in the nice area, so that if you have children, you can then get them into the nice school, so they can then end up in this place. It's confusing. And if I'm honest, sometimes it's exhausting. For the record, I have no problem with good education. I have no problem with catchment areas or salaries or jobs. But sometimes the mindset that it can create in us is, I've got to do better and be more impressive so that people will look at me, so that I can stand at the front aged 5 as a trier, so that I can get onto the property ladder, so that I can. Sometimes it is exhausting. It's exhausting because you have to try very hard, but it's also exhausting because of all the emotional investment in the whole thing. Because it never really ends. You never kind of get to the point where suddenly, oh great, I'm sorted now. I'll never have to do another thing in order to get another thing. It's also exhausting because you've never done quite enough. There's always something more you could do. There's always another little bit more you could get towards that grade. There's always another hour more work you could do. There's always another pay increase that you could aspire to. There's always a bigger house. It just sort of keeps going and going and going. It's also exhausting because there's that fear of, what if one day I drop off the whole thing? What if I don't meet the grade? You know, if I'm aspiring to this and I don't get there, well, what if I don't? And the other reason it's tiring, and the other reason it can sometimes be difficult for us, and we can want to escape that, is because what does it do in the way that you're relating to everyone else? Because if there's a grade, and you're trying to meet it, then there's also part of you that's thinking, if I want to be the top of the class, or if I want to get that job, then someone else isn't going to get it, and someone else isn't going to be. And so we end up comparing ourselves. All of this stuff so that I can be seen as more impressive than everyone else. I'm the 5-year-old stood at the front of class, and none of you are. This isn't just sort of public therapy for me, by the way. I'm getting to the point. It's exhausting, this whole trying hard, and you'll be rewarded based on your achievements. It's part of the way our world works. And I'm not complaining completely about that. But sometimes you just want to escape. I do. Sometimes I wish that I could go through my life and actually my value was based not just on what I'd done that other people could see was impressive, but it was based on something else. I want to look at some words in the Bible because I believe there is another way. There is another way to live. There's a solution to this sort of rat race that we can find ourselves in, this never-ending treadmill where we're running and not really getting any further. I want to look at them. They're in Mark chapter 10. Mark is one of the stories about Jesus' life. It's one of the people who wrote about what he did. And just a few verses from verse 41 to 45. And I want to read them. And I want to explain what's gone on just before. It says, when the 10, that's the 10 disciples apart from James and John. Oh, that woke you up a little bit. So, don't worry, Alfred. So when the 10 heard this, they began to be angry with James and John. So what's gone on here, just to give you a bit of context, is that James and John, 2 of the 12 disciples, have gone up to Jesus and said, hey, Jesus, when your kingdom comes, when you're the king and everyone's, bowing down to you and worshipping you, then we want to be the ones sat on either side of you. The other 10, they're okay, but we want to be the ones with all the glory. We want to be the ones who have that position and status with you. We want to be the ones right at the top with you. Well, understandably, the other 10, when they heard about this, weren't that keen. They were meant to be a band. They were meant to be a team. And now there's these 2 who are trying to elevate themselves, who are trying to get the reward, trying to get that achievement. So when the 10 heard this, they began to be angry with James and John. So Jesus called them and said to them, you know that among the Gentiles, those whom they recognize as rulers lord over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. But it's not so among you. But whoever wishes to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wishes to be the first among you must be slave of all. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. This is Jesus' words. I want to unpack them a little bit and see what they might say to this culture of the rat race, of trying to achieve, to be impressive, to get more, so that you can then jump back into it. So Jesus is talking about a different approach to power. He talks about a different power structure, a different kind of culture. He says that you look around and you see these leaders and the people who are at the top, who have made it, who have got there. What do they do with that power? Do they use it to help other people up? No, they lord it over people. They stand over people and they say, well, I'm now impressive. I had to work really hard to get here, and so I'm going to make you do the same thing. It's that kind of lording it over. It's treating people as less than you, which is kind of what you've got to do in this world if you want to get to the top, or so we might think. So you know that these people lord it over you, that the rulers are these people who act with dominance and power and status. But Jesus says it shouldn't be like that with you. With you who are my followers, it's not so among you, he says, verse 43. But whoever wishes to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first must be slave of all. There's these two disciples who've said, we want to be better than all the rest. And Jesus is saying, basically, if you want to be better than all the rest, then be better at serving them. Make yourself lower. Because that's what greatness looks like in my family, in my kingdom. He's talking about a different way of being. But the thing is, we could look at that and go, oh, fantastic, great. Well, that's another way to live. I can do that. I can decide I'm going to not care about my own status. I'm going to not care about my own glory. I'm just going to serve people. And that's great. But if we did that, that would be missing the point. Because what Jesus is saying here about a different approach to power, a different approach to this structure, is that that's just a symptom of what he wants to do. This new approach to the way we relate to people, the way we relate to power and dominance, it's just a symptom. It's not the cause. There's something deeper that he wants to do. And if you'll let him do it, then we can have this new way of engaging with the world. Because he's not talking just about a different way of treating people. He's talking about a whole different way of life. He's talking about a new kingdom. The language of the Bible, it talks about Jesus bringing a new kingdom. That we may live in this world, and that we have rulers and we have people that we answer to. But he's saying there's another way. There's another kingdom, and I invite you to be part of it. And he's the king. But how do we enter that kingdom? I want to just read and focus on this last verse. For the Son of Man, that was Jesus. Jesus referred to himself as the Son of Man. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. What does that mean? Well, I think that one of the things it means is that Jesus came to be the answer to this problem of a rewards, achievement, power, dominance, status society. Because the real problem with that, the real problem with this mentality that says, if you're good enough, then you can get this, and if you do this, then you can get that, is that I'm not good enough. That's the problem I face. Sure, I might be good enough to get into the school. I might be good enough to get onto the property ladder. I might be able to achieve a certain amount, but am I deep down good enough for the things that matter? I don't think I am. I've come to the conclusion that I can't do it on my own. Why? Well, because there's far more at stakes, I believe, in this world and in this life than just what job or what salary or what house or what area or what grade or how beautiful and wonderful my family looks or how many people hang on my every word or anything like that. There's far more at stake. I believe that there is a relationship with God at stake, with the person who created everything. That song we sung first, indescribable. This God who spoke the world into being. If you believe that there is such a God, if you believe that there is someone who created all of this stuff, and if you don't, then I'd ask you to think about that. But if you do, then do you want to have a relationship with him? Because I believe he offers that. But here's the thing, is a God that good, a God that big, a God that wonderful and marvelous, am I good enough for him? I don't think I am. Why do I say that? Well, we had a screen down earlier on. Please don't put it down, again, just for the moment. We had a screen down earlier on. If the projector, instead of projecting words and video of what's going on here, if that projector had projected onto it everything I'd ever done, and everything I'd ever said, and everything I'd ever thought, the good bits and the other bits, and if I knew that all of you were going to sit there and watch the reel of my life, I would run away. I would not be proud to sit here and say, yeah, this is me. This is a picture of me. There are things about my life I'm proud of. There are things where I think I've done good things. There are large parts of my life that I'm not proud of, that I'm not good enough. I know that I'm not perfect. I think we all know that we're not perfect. And when we're talking about a God who is that powerful and that good and that marvelous, then really to me it makes sense that only perfection is what he's after. That only perfection is worth his time. To be honest, I wouldn't be interested in a God who wasn't perfect. I wouldn't be interested in a God who could settle for something less than that. So it's a problem. And one of the things that I think God wants to say to us is, or God does say to us, is that if we want to live in a world and in a life and in a kingdom that is based entirely on your own achievements and what you've done and being rewarded for all of that, then he will let you. He will let you live and relate to him based on what you're like and what you've done, the good bits, but also the bad bits. And if we're talking about perfection, if we're talking about a God that's that good, then I don't think any of us measure up. But this is good news, not bad news, because Jesus doesn't say, so that's the state you're in. He says, I came not to be served. Jesus, God, the Son of God, the King of heaven, came not to lord it over people like other rulers do. He came not so that he could be served, but so that he could serve others. And what does he say? And to give his life as a ransom for many. Many, by the way, doesn't mean just a few. We might look at many and go, well, it's not all, so that means surely Jesus is trying to exclude people, because if he was trying to be expansive and inclusive, he would say for all. He gave his life he gave his life for all people. For other people, for the people reading this and writing at the time, their culture wouldn't have been comparing many with all. They'd have been comparing many with just the fact there's one Jesus. That one person died so that many people, loads of people, the gates are flung open. There's room for everyone to come in. See, Jesus is the only person that ever lived, I believe, who did deserve the reward, who did deserve God, who did deserve that life. He was perfect. He loved people even when they were killing him. He prayed for people even when they were crucifying him. He served people. He loved people. He was kind. He was gentle. He was compassionate. He stood against what was wrong and stood for what was right. The Jesus that's portrayed in the Bible is perfect. He lives the life I wish I had the strength to live, but I know I don't. He had that reward if he'd wanted it, but instead, he chose not to claim it. He chose to give his life instead of claim that he had a right to his own life. He chose not to have it. Why? So that we could have it. To give his life as a ransom. To buy us back. To redeem us is one of the words that the Bible uses. And to redeem means to give something value again. Means to place value back into it. This is what Jesus is doing on the cross. If you've ever wondered why it is that we celebrate a man dying, hiya, have a good week, Michael. Hope to see you again next week. We will be praying for you, don't worry. So if you've ever wondered why it is that Christians celebrate someone dying, it's because him dying means that I don't have to. Because I want to be close to God. And the opposite of closeness to God is dying and never being near him again. And I believe that's what would happen to me Because I have the choice either to be judged based on what's whacked up on that screen or by what Jesus did. And Jesus chooses to give me that life. And you know what? That is what rescues me from that rat race mentality. Because instead of feeling as though I have to achieve in order to be good enough, instead, Jesus says, you're good enough because I made you good enough. It's not based on what you've done. It's not based on whether you've done X or whether you've accrued this or whether you've gained that or whether you've delivered on this. He's done all of that for me and he's given it to me so I don't have to try and keep up in order to be impressive anymore. Releases me from shame because the things that I've done that aren't good enough, I'm given forgiveness instead of condemnation. Tells me that I'm loved. Releases me from feeling as though I have to shape up in the world. And helps my relationship with other people. Because instead of competing for the same thing, instead of saying, well, there's only one role and one out of the 17 of you is going to get it, we can all have it. And instead of thinking, I want to achieve and I want to be top and I want to be at the top of the pile, I want to help everyone get there. And I recognize that I'll only ever be at the bottom of the pile because I want to be a servant. Because the only person who belongs there is Jesus, and he came down to pull me up. That's the message of what Christians believe. We believe that God loved us so much that he sent his son to die for us because there's another way to live. And it's not exhausting, it's releasing. It doesn't fill you with shame, it fills you with hope. It doesn't make you feel as though you're not good enough. It makes you feel as though God loved you. That's what I believe. What do we have to do? What do we have to do to make that true for us? What do we have to do to be one of the many for whom Jesus did this? All we have to do is say yes. All we have to do is say thank you. All we have to do is say, I want to get out of that mentality. I don't want to be dominated by that anymore. I don't want to be pulled back into it. I don't want to have to measure myself against a class of 30 other 5-year-olds so that I can be the one who's seen as impressive. I don't want to have to live based on my own merits. I want to live in a relationship with the one who has all the merits and who's chosen to give them to me. All we have to do is say yes. I believe you've done that for me. Thank you. It's no more complicated than that. There's no entrance test. That would defy the point. There's no grade. That would defy the point. There's no pass mark. That would defy the point. It's on offer, freely available to every single one of you. And all you have to do is to say yes. In a moment, we're going to share a meal. Not a full meal. You'll still want lunch. But we're going to share some bread and some wine. It's actually just grape juice, although I do have some alcoholic wine if you prefer. It's a family meal. It's a meal for that kingdom, for that family I've been talking about. It's a meal for those of us who are Christians and want to thank Jesus for what he's done. As we share the bread, what we're doing is we're remembering that on the cross, Jesus allowed his body to be broken for all the reasons I've just talked about. And as we drink the wine, we're remembering that Jesus poured out his blood, that a spear was put in his side and blood poured out. Why? For all the reasons I've just talked about. To rescue us from that life of never feeling good enough and to give us worth and value again. It's a meal for those who've said yes to Jesus, or those who are saying yes to Jesus. So in a moment, I'm gonna pray, and I'm going to invite some people to come and serve. And all they're going to do is they're going to take some bread and take some wine, and it's going to pass along the rows. Someone might say some words to you. Don't feel as though you need to say any words to the person next to you as you pass it along. You can if you want to. You don't have to. If you've said yes to Jesus today or any other time in your life, or if you want to start taking that step, if you want to say, I want to make a step with you, I want to put a marker in the sand and say, I actually want to be freed from that life. Not completely sure, I don't understand everything. None of us does. But if you want to make a step like that, then by all means, take the bread and take some wine. eat them and drink them. If you don't want to do that, if that's not something that you're thinking, then just don't feel any shame in letting the bread and the wine go past you. But before that, could I ask you to do me a favor? Because I want to pray for us. And could I just ask you to bow your head and to close your eyes? Not because I'm going to do anything funny or secret, but just to respect one another. Father God, I want to thank you that I'm not good enough because of what I've done. I want to thank you that you've made me good enough because of what you've done. Sometimes my own pride gets in the way of that, and I want to be good enough by myself, but I know that there are times when I fail. I want to thank you for rescuing me from always needing to measure up and from the exhaustion of it. And I want to pray that you would be releasing others from that exhaustion, from that mindset, from that culture that robs us of so much. For people here today who feel as though they're just about keeping their head above water, who feel as though they're about to get found out as not being as good as people previously thought. People who are worried about whether they'll keep the job when the redundancies come, whether they'll be able to get onto that ladder, whether their kids will get into those schools. Those things are important, and they do matter. And I pray that you would have your hand at work in each of those things, but protect us from feeling that our value comes from all of them. That we are what we do, or we are where we live, or we are what we've achieved. Help us to say yes to you, because we know you've said yes to us.